Good evening, everyone. I'm Veronica Reynolds. I'm the head of community relations at New City Library. Um, I'm really pleased to welcome Judy Umlas tonight to speak with us about book publishing, about publishing her book in particular. But in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Judy, who published recently Soulmates and Strangers. She's going to tell you about her publication process, what that was like for her, and I believe also do a reading from her book. So I'm looking forward to that immensely. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And Veronica, thanks for your patience and determination in the face of a lot of things going on with your building, your facility, and still you made it happen. So I appreciate that very much. And welcome everybody to Book Publishing 101, or You Have Something to Say. And I believe that everybody has something to say. And probably anybody who shows up here tonight has thought about publishing a book or considered it or said, no, I can't do it, but you still have a message. And I want to just take you through a brief journey of how I got started in the publishing world. Okay, so I worked at CBS Television as a producer, a writer, and a manager for 12 years. In my 12th year, I became pregnant, and it was not common to be a pregnant businesswoman working up to one's due date at that time. This is the 1980s. And I was shocked at how weird everyone started to act toward me. Strange comments like, what did you do, swallow a basketball? I mean, now they would never, ever, ever do that. But in that day, it was so strange. And one day I got really, really exasperated. And I went outside on my lunch hour and I sat on a step and I wrote what turned out to be this article, How Not to Talk to a Pregnant Businesswoman. Well, I submitted it to 14 magazines, count them, 14. And I got 14 of the nicest rejection letters you could ever imagine. But this really was bothering me. And I was in a women's support writers group, and somebody said, you know what? My nephew just got out of college. He doesn't know what he wants to do. He could just put literary agent under his name and try sending them out to the same magazines. Well, that's what he did. And one of them, Working Woman magazine, bought it. And back in the 80s, they paid $400 to me for writing that article. I was shocked. But the real shocker was that they took the article, made it their cover story, and before I knew it, I was on Good Morning America as the expert on how not to talk to a pregnant businesswoman. This was such a wild journey. I never predicted it. But what I learned from that journey is that words have power. They truly have power to change conditions that are deplorable, that we hate personally, that we just can't tolerate. And that actually took me to my next book, which is The Power of Acknowledgement. And this came after I took a maternity leave, and my job was eliminated at CBS while on my maternity leave. That's okay. It led to my working at a fantastic company called the International Institute for Learning, where I've been for 31 years now. And along the way, the CEO asked me to start up a publishing company. Knowing nothing about publishing, I said, sure. Actually, I didn't say sure at first, but I did agree to do it. And my husband, Bob Umlas, who's here, was our very first author that we published. And his book was called This Isn't Excel, It's Magic, because he's an Excel guru, has written 5 books on the subject. And it was just a wonderful launch, and it really sold. It was amazing. So after a couple of other books, I started to get very frustrated in life and at work and in other corporations that I dealt with the fact that people felt so unappreciated. And in fact, often when I would acknowledge somebody, their jaws would drop and they would say things like, no one ever appreciates me. All I hear are complaints. And it got me to the point where one day I went into the Dunkin' Donuts coffee shop in Northdale, New Jersey, and I ordered a small black, half decaf, half regular caramel coffee. And there was a new barista there. I don't know if they have baristas in Dunkin' Donuts, but she took my order. And then the next day I came back and I gave it to her again. And the third day I came to the coffee shop. And as I got to the front of the line, she's holding a cup. I said, "What's that?" And she looked at me like I was really strange. She said, "That's your small black, half decaf, half regular caramel coffee." And I said, "I can't believe it. You're a genius. How did you learn that? How did you have any idea of what that crazy order is? I have trouble remembering it myself." And she started to cry. She said, "No one ever compliments me. I only hear complaints. Thank you for doing that." And that was it. I'm pounding my desk. That was it. That's when I said to my boss, "I have to write a book." And she said, what's it called?" I said, "I think it's called The Power of Acknowledgement." And she asked me what it was about. And I told her, and my frustration. I said, "I've got to change the situations that I come across almost on a daily basis. I have to bring acknowledgement into corporations, into communities, into families." And I just want to read you the very opening paragraph of that book, because this will give you a sense of what I had to say, what I really had to say. And it's, "What actions would you take if you knew with absolute certainty that a simple action you could take every day for no cost and little effort would change your world and the world at large dramatically and profoundly for the better? What if this ability is something every person on this planet possesses, yet few use much, if at all? What if using it regularly would transform your relationship with your husband or your wife? What if doing it would make your colleagues at work not be able to do enough for you and make the office atmosphere vibrant, productive, and alive instead of lethargic, competitive, frustrated, and bored? All of this is possible, yet most people don't recognize this incredible tool or understand its power. What all of us possess, but most of us don't use enough, is the power of acknowledgement." And this little book, 109 pages, I would say has changed many lives, many people. And the minute it was published, I was sent out by my company to train leaders literally around the world. I ended up in Finland and Brazil and Canada and Europe and France. It was just amazing. And everybody was transformed. I mean, I saw huge changes in the people, and they thanked me for years after. I get emails saying that really has worked. And I have, that led to actually my second book, Grateful Leadership, using the power of acknowledgement to engage all your people and achieve superior results. Because McGraw-Hill got wind of this little book called The Power of Acknowledgement that I met somebody at a book show. He knew an agent. She had done some good work, and she took my book to 5 publishers, and one of them said yes. So, I mean, I've had every kind of situation. And once I had done Grateful Leadership, the impact was very strong. And I would train leaders who would say to me, "Judy, you have to write a book for kids." I said, "I don't do that. I'm not a kid's author." They said, "I want to make sure that my kids don't become 30, 40, or 50 before they learn how to give appreciation and receive it too, by the way." So I ended up writing, sorry, I only have the Portuguese version of it, but it's been translated into Portuguese. The Power of Acknowledgement is in Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, and French. Yeah, so I mean, it's just like a crazy and exciting journey. But it's the most recent book of mine that has really been my heart's work. I mean, I always say that my heart holds the pen as I write, that I do write from the heart always. But this book was something very, very different. And I didn't even know I was going to write a book. And what I will tell you is that my mother always shared with me her love of her French pen pal. It turned out she met Claudia. My mother was living in the Bronx, New York, and she was taking French, and she loved the French language. And the teacher there said, who would like a pen pal in France? And my mother was the only person who raised her hand. Similarly, in Lyon, France, the teacher, the English teacher, the kids were learning English, said, who would like an American pen pal? Claudia was the only person in the class who raised her hand. And so they were destined to be each other's pen pal. It was absolutely amazing. And when I got older and I studied French, my mother knew I loved it so much. And every year at holiday time, we would get a huge package of goodies from Claudia. And my mother would have to start shopping in July for Christmas to get our package to her. So it was sort of a family tradition and interaction. When I was 18 years old and between high school and college, my mother said, how would you like to go to France and live with Claudia and her husband, Mario? I said, Mom, they don't have children. They don't have no idea what to do with an 18-year-old. And my mother said, it's all arranged. If you want to go, they want you. So that began one of the best summers of my life. No, the best summer of my life. And then came all the back and forths. And at one point on one of my many trips there, this one, I took my 14-year-old son at the time to be with Mario and Claudia. And she gave me a packet of letters from my mother. Now she said, I have hundreds of letters from your mother. Now she was like in her 90s. And she said, I don't know what I did with all of them, but I have these. The first letter she wrote me from 1936 to 1947. And she had them in a beautiful lace envelope. And she gave me these letters and I treasured them. And I'm going to read you a little bit from one of the letters from the beginning of the book also. But I didn't want to give this to a publisher. I did arrange to have a publishing deal with a small history publisher because this is a memoir, but it was too painful. And he wanted to take out things, and he was going to be the boss, and I could not entrust it. So our family formed Handler and Wagreich Publishing, and you can go to this link at some point if you'd like to learn about all of our upcoming books plus this one. And I'll just show you how mine is in the memoirs and personal connections, Soulmates and Strangers. And, there's just all the reviews are up there and some of the beautiful pictures. But I had to form my own publishing company because I didn't trust anybody else to publish this book. And that was, very scary to form your own publishing. Now, is this the same as being a self-published author? Yeah, kind of. But this one has a publishing company name, publishing company name to it, sorry. And I just also wanted to show you Bob Umlas's book is coming up soon. I think you will like it. He's in education and technology. And this book is written for me, for Excel Preschool, Understanding Microsoft Excel Finally for Technologically Challenged Adults. So that's coming out soon. And we have another book in another genre. I mean, and we made all this up. You have to understand it. It's like truly amazing. And in recovery and self-improvement, We have a book called Heroin Nation, a very deeply disturbing, but also amazingly hopeful book, and how to reach the heroin addicts and how their families can really do well by them. And then we have a book coming up from a dear friend who is writing just a beautiful, beautiful children's book called America's Welcome. So that's, that's how that part of the publishing journey had worked. And again, it was not easy, but I've tried I have such a variety of ways that I have done it. And I wanted to just read you a little bit of one of the opening chapters. The chapter is called The Mother I Never Knew. This is Soulmates and Strangers, available on Amazon, but at a 25% discount on handlerandwagreich.com. So take your choice. But if you use the word pen pal, you have to use the discount code pen pal. The Mother I Never Knew. Starting with that first letter back on February 3rd, 1936. Each letter was written half in French and half in English. And I have an introductory paragraph, a chapter about how I got these letters and my mother and her relationship with her pen pal. So after the first one, most of the letters included teacher-like corrections of each other's words, which they had both agreed they needed. Neither knew at the time that they would become teachers, my mother at an elementary school and Claudia at a nursery school. But the seeds of caring instruction by both were evident already. These young girls would later become two fully devoted educators, each a lifelong lover of learning and teaching. When Sylvia, my then 15-year-old mother, and just imagine what that's like to meet your 15-year-old mother. It's amazing, it's wonderful, and it's totally creepy. So it's a combination. When Sylvia, my then 15-year-old mother-to-be, expressed her great appreciation of the photo that Claudia had sent her and asked, "Who is the other girl with whom you are standing?" I had to laugh. My mother was always a matchmaker, even back then. Quote, she says, "The reason I ask you this is that I have a very nice girlfriend who would like to correspond with a young girl in France. If you know of anyone, will you please ask her to send a letter to my friend Blossom?" I chuckled over their attempts to create other well-suited pairs like themselves. And so it's just learning letter by letter. And I would not jump to the end. I made myself read them chronologically, and I couldn't read them until my mother had actually passed away. It was just too disturbing because she had she was in her decline, and it just was way too upsetting. So at the very end of the book, I'm just going to read you. It's not giving anything away, but it says, "I weep as I read the last letter from my mother that I will ever see." And pardon me, I get choked up when I even think about it. "But I have a new set of memories now, thanks to Claudia. Priceless memories of the mother I always loved so dearly, but never knew as a young girl and as a young woman. I am truly grateful to Claudia for saving these treasures and leaving them as her legacy to me. There is no greater inheritance she and my mother could have left me. Few women can say they knew their mother as a young girl from before their own birth, as I have come to know mine. And for that gift, I am and will forever be truly blessed and grateful." So that's Soulmates and Strangers. And I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the story of it. That's the first letter, February 3rd, 1936 to March 26th, 1947. And I could see, everything is my mother's handwriting. So it's really just amazing. And out of the blue, and these letters are going back and forth, and I'm hearing about every John, Joe, Tom, Harry, Dick, whatever, all these boyfriends my mother had that I never knew about. And then suddenly in 1944, she said, "Paul and I got married." She hadn't even mentioned this Paul. And I read every letter. They were truly sequential. You could see there was nothing in between that had been left out. And so she married him, and suddenly, there was a Paul. And this is my father's first dental office in the Bronx. And she was so proud of that letterhead, 80 Strong Street, which is where I was born. And I remembered the apartment, but she drew pictures of it and described things my brother and I never knew of before. And then, later on, when I did go to France to live with them, Mario and Claudia, I had their full attention for a summer. And this photograph is so symbolic of their undivided attention, literally. And they took me all over. They took me to Switzerland. They took me to Spain, all over France. And I just had this overwhelming sense of gratitude for that focus, for that love that they gave me. So these are really precious people, precious legacies. They took me to farmlands. I had never, ever been able to enjoy a tomato since I went to that farm and ate the most delicious, incomparable tasting tomato. So I've never liked tomatoes that are grown in America, no matter where and what, favorite environment. So it's, they spoiled me in some ways. And again, this was Switzerland. It's just such a beautiful journey. And I was telling them that this guy, Bob, had been asking me to marry him since I was 16 years old on our first date. And now I was 18 and he was still asking me, and he was getting a little impatient. And they said, after I described him, they said, marry him. You should marry Bob. So I listened to them, and 55 years later, he is a keeper. And then we brought my daughter Stephanie there, wonderful exchange. That's Claudia in the foreground, little Stephanie there. And now we are about to launch the French version, because I feel like my job is not done until I give this wonderful story of America and French relations to the French. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I do have my wonderful French teacher here, Valerie Galinsky. Valerie, can we see you? She's here, and she did this beautiful, beautiful translation.
Hi, everyone.
Can we share? Are you on camera? I'm not
Yes,
seeing you.
I'm right here. You have to scroll down, maybe scroll down or scroll up.
Okay, now I can't see everybody.
It's because you're presenting Moji, but we can see her.
Okay, good. Well, Valerie, I would love for you to tell what the journey has been like. She took a translation that had been done by a college student for me, and it was a great first attempt, but I knew it wasn't perfect. And when I took it to Valerie, who does neurolinguistic coaching and French language lessons, I knew it would be perfect. I knew it would be perfect. So Valerie, you've done an amazing job. And would you say a few words?
Yeah, sure. It was actually a pleasure. It was my first time translating a whole book.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank you, Judy, for giving me that opportunity. It was a big challenge, but it also made me realize the difference between the French and the English language, because I teach French and English, but when you're translating an entire book, you also have to get into the feeling of the author, and you realize that the expressions are very different. For example, the French language I discovered, I knew, but I realized how much it is more flowery and ornamental than English. So each sentence I was translating, I had to really morph it into the French so that a person who reads it in France would feel like it was written in French. Yes. So it was really a delight. when I first read it, I loved it because it was
Aw.
so easy to read and so pleasant and so sweet. And that's why I took it, because if it had been something corporate or, you know, I would not. So it was definitely a pleasure. And thank you, Judy, for giving me the opportunity.
Well, you're welcome. And then we turned the proofreading of the book into, I don't know, about 10 French lessons. We went through every word on every page. I read the French, and my understanding level is pretty advanced. My speaking level is, intermediate plus, right, Valerie?
Absolutely. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
And but we fought over certain things, and it was amazing to me because sometimes what I had meant didn't come across. So Valerie would make the change, and other times I got to see, well, French is a different kind of language. It is more flowery, and okay, it's not an exact translation, but it gets the intent of what I was trying to communicate. And I cried through every proofreading session that we had, didn't I?
That is true. That is true. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was so worth it. And I'm so honored. And I just have to find a way to get it into, a distributor's hands or so. I don't know yet. I never know what I'm going to be doing next with this book. But it's like that film, The Never Ending Story. This Soulmates and Strangers, Âme sœur et inconnue, is a never-ending story. And people at the sessions I have led have raised some amazing points that make me say I have to investigate. And I'll tell you about one of those in a minute. But right now, wait, whoops. Okay. All right. What does Soulmates and Strangers have to do with the cinema? Okay, well, Bob and I love independent films, and we are members of the Jacob Burns Film Center. If anybody knows of it, I don't know, but it's a great center, and they always have events with directors of films or sometimes the star of a film. It's amazing who comes there. So we went to see a film called 13 Lives, and Ron Howard, the director, was there. He was actually with us. And a friend of mine named Aramast, he's supposed to be here. I don't know if he is here tonight. Aramast. But anyway, he knew about this book, and he said, oh, when you go see the film, and you see Ron Howard, give him a copy of Soulmates and Strangers. And I giggled. I said, you're kidding, right? He said, no. Because I had told Armast that 2 filmmakers had asked me for the rights to this story. One had seen it at a book signing at a library in Pennsylvania. Another was a filmmaker I knew through my work. They both wanted the rights to the book, and I wasn't quite ready to give them away yet or sell them. So I listened to Armast, and I went up to Ron Howard at the end, and I said, you would be my dream director for this film. I've been approached by 2 film directors. You are it. Would you accept a copy of the book? And he said, sure. And he took it. And that was it. I didn't know what happened. Did he give it to his chauffeur or, the landlord? I didn't know what happened to the book. But I am taking the liberty of sharing this personal note from Ron Howard that his assistant sent me. Dear Ms. Umlas, thank you for the copy of your terrific book, Soulmates and Strangers. So evocative, interesting, and at times emotional. I'm guessing that the reaction has been strongly positive and that writing it must have been fulfilling and enlightening. Great work. All the best, Ron. Oh, and I went crazy with that. I went absolutely crazy. And of course I wrote back and I said, so do you know anybody who might be interested in directing this film? And I did not hear anything back from him yet, but this was only a few days ago. It took two or 3 months to get that note. But what I'm saying is, if you have something to say it, and you'll find the way. There are so many ways to get a book written and published. You're the author, so there's only one way to do that, unless you have a ghostwriter, which I don't recommend. But then to get it published, there is always a way, always, always. And so that is my little presentation, and I would like to know if you have any questions. And thank you all for being here. I love speaking about this book. It's just so, heartfelt for me.